Household water planning usually sits in a space between routine convenience and low probability disruption. Most of the time, water arrives through municipal infrastructure, a private well, or a managed building supply. When people start thinking about alternatives, it is typically because they are trying to reduce dependency on a single supply path, limit interruptions, or create a buffer for short-term outages. The most common approaches tend to be effort-heavy in different ways. Stored water is simple in concept, but demanding in logistics. It requires recurring purchasing, storage space, container rotation, and periodic replacement. It also creates a constant inventory problem, knowing how much exists, where it is, and whether it is still suitable for use. Rain capture and cistern systems are often framed as a straightforward alternative, but they usually involve more infrastructure than expected. Gutters, first flush diversion, tank sizing, filtration, and seasonal variability become core parts of the system. In many places, local rules and permitting can also influence what is practical. Well drilling and pump-based solutions can reduce reliance on city supply, but they typically involve high upfront cost, uncertainty about yield, long lead times, and ongoing maintenance. Even when a well is available, water quality can still require filtration and testing. Commercial equipment solutions exist as well, including large water storage tanks, filtration systems, and atmospheric water generator units. These options often reduce DIY complexity, but they trade that for higher purchase price, proprietary parts, replacement filters, and a more appliance-like maintenance cycle. Across these categories, friction usually comes from accumulation rather than any single step. Even a simple plan often becomes a combination of storage, purification, ongoing checks, and habit changes. Some people accept that structure, others look for a more repeatable, set and run routine, even if it is less flexible or less customizable. SmartWaterBox is presented as a digital, informational product rather than a physical device. The core item being sold is a guide, described as containing plans and instructions for building an off-grid, water-related system. The marketing language frames the underlying concept as an atmospheric water generator style approach, meaning water is collected from humidity in the air through a condensation process. In practical terms, the product positions itself as a blueprint-style package. The materials describe inclusions such as a set of build plans or schematics, a materials and tools list, step-by-step assembly guidance, notes related to storage and purification practices, troubleshooting or upgrade suggestions, some form of support channel presented as ongoing access. The scope, as described, is not a municipal scale solution and not a utility replacement in the legal or infrastructure sense. It is framed more like a household scale, independent method intended to produce water without connecting to the public water line. The conceptual framing in the sales copy uses heavy narrative and political language, but the underlying product category is closer to DIY preparedness / off-grid instruction manual than to a regulated consumer appliance. The deliverable is information, a method, a parts list, and a build outline. Because SmartWaterBox is positioned as a guide, usage happens in phases. The first phase is reading and planning. For most DIY build-style products, the initial time requirement is not the assembly itself, but interpretation, understanding the parts list, confirming what is already available, and identifying what must be purchased. This stage also includes deciding whether the build fits the available space and household constraints. The second phase is sourcing components. This can range from a simple hardware store run to a longer process of comparing alternatives, finding compatible parts, and handling substitutions when exact items are not available. In many DIY systems, substitutions are where complexity increases, because small differences in components can change fit, reliability, and maintenance needs. The third phase is assembly and setup. The sales copy frames this as achievable in a short window, but build complexity in this category usually depends on the builder's experience with basic tools, safe electrical handling, sealed containers, airflow management, and hygiene-related decisions for storage. The ongoing phase is repeatability and maintenance. Any atmospheric collection method is inherently dependent on environmental conditions. Even without evaluating effectiveness, the operational reality typically includes the need for electrical power for moving air and cooling or condensing processes, unless a separate power plant exists, regular cleaning of collection surfaces and storage containers, attention to storage conditions to reduce contamination risk, periodic inspection of seals, tubing, and any moving parts, managing noise, heat output, and physical footprint if the system behaves like an appliance. Interaction level is therefore not hands-off in the way a normal tap is. It is closer to low to moderate interaction, depending on how stable the setup is and how strict the hygiene routine is. Environmental needs are a central constraint for this category. Humidity, temperature, airflow, and available indoor or sheltered space generally influence how practical atmospheric collection approaches are to run as a routine. In dry climates, the system may become more dependent on operating time, power usage, and careful placement, even without making any claims about output. SmartWaterBox, as described, fits a specific preference profile, people who tolerate a one-time learning curve, and build effort in exchange for a repeatable routine that is not tied to stored inventory. It can make logical sense for people who prefer DIY projects and are comfortable with basic assembly and troubleshooting, want a household-scale independent layer rather than relying only on stored water, are willing to treat water collection as an ongoing system with cleaning and checks, have the space to host a device-like setup, and can accommodate sound and heat, similar to home equipment, except that environmental conditions may influence practicality, and that consistency may require operational adjustments. It is less likely to fit people who want a fully certified, appliance-like solution with warranties, regulated performance standards, and predictable replacement cycles, prefer a system that is close to zero maintenance, similar to municipal supply, do not want to manage sanitation routines, container cleaning, or periodic inspection, have limited tolerance for DIY, ambiguity, substitutions, or troubleshooting, need guaranteed output characteristics rather than a method-based approach described in a guide. In other words, the fit is mostly about effort, tolerance, and operational mindset, not about outcomes. The product's format assumes some willingness to build, interpret instructions, and maintain a setup over time. Compared with water storage, SmartWaterBox positions itself as a production-style approach rather than an inventory approach. Storage is mostly logistics, buying, rotating, and making space. A production approach shifts the work towards setup and upkeep. A device must run, be maintained, and be kept hygienic. Compared with rain capture, the product's concept is framed as less dependent on rainfall timing, but it introduces a different dependency: ambient conditions and power. Rain systems can be passive once installed, but they are seasonal and infrastructure heavy. Atmospheric collection systems can be run more routinely, but they behave more like equipment. Compared with wells, this type of product avoids drilling and permitting complexity, but it also does not become a true source in the same way a well can. A well is a property-level infrastructure investment with known service patterns and professional support options. A DIY guide is a method, more flexible upfront, but usually more variable in execution. Compared with buying a commercial atmospheric water generator unit, the guide format trades appliance certainty for DIY adaptability. A commercial unit typically has known specifications, standardized parts, and a predictable filter replacement cycle. A DIY build may reduce dependence on proprietary components, but it also shifts responsibility for safety, hygiene, and reliability onto the builder. Overall, the positioning is consistent with a trade, Depth, certification, and standardization are exchanged for a simpler purchase and a build-it-yourself path. The promise in the marketing is framed as independence, but the operational reality is closer to adopting a small household system that needs attention, cleaning, and a stable operating environment. The product remains a guide, not a regulated device. That distinction matters because the effort profile is not only time to use, but also time to build, time to maintain, and time to troubleshoot. The framing can be left there, as a DIY informational package aimed at people who prefer systems they can assemble and control, and who accept that the work shifts from buying water to managing a routine that attempts to generate it.